hate that I have to put this ugly thing in front of my nice intro that I like so much. Oh well, let's go. Good morning. It is Friday, August 10th, 2018. Yay, it's Friday. Most of the birthdays are out of the way for this month, but if I missed you, happy birthday, Leos. Let's not stay at the desk. Let's find something else to do. I started off today with every good intention of writing an article about the first anniversary of the Charlottesville protests 1 year ago and the anniversary, I don't know what you want to call it, commemoration this weekend. And that was going to be a lead-in into a three-part series that I just don't have the heart for today. It's Friday. My dog's already pestering me like crazy, although she's given up now, to go do something. And as a content producer, I have to make sure that there's something available every day for my readers, my viewers, my collaborators, and just didn't have the heart to do it today. So we're going someplace that I love. So as you can see, we are at the Staglieno cemetery. And to my Italian friends, I'm sorry. I muddle through Italian the best I can, and it is what it is. So this is the famous Monteverdi monument featured in modern print art on the Joy Division Bell cover, which is why it's famous outside of Italy at all. And this cemetery is located, as you saw, in Genoa, Italy, and it's not very well known, but it is the finest example of monumental art which survives intact and is being restored in the world. And I just love this place. I thought this little Friday tour might be a good way for you to get to know a little bit about the person behind the microphone, so to speak. And this first image is from Villa Pianovi. It is depicts a young wife saying her final goodbye to her husband. I don't know much more about it. I've used this image before, but I've never really read about this family and the choice of this imagery. And for me, in early August, I learned of the death of my former husband. I consider myself a widow. I was only ever married once. And despite the fact that we were legally divorced, I never really considered that we were spiritually divorced. We both went into the marriage as children of divorced parents. And part of our vow to each other is that we would not put our children through what we went through as children of divorced parents. It's a scar that never really leaves you, even though you heal from it and move on. I should point out that my husband's death was about 10 years ago. It was sudden. He was in the prime of his life and having just achieved a very dearly held life goal. He died suddenly, and I was very cruelly prevented from saying goodbye to him. I was not informed that he was sick or in any danger whatsoever, and we have a child together, so that is a parental issue that should have been, I should have been informed that he was, mortally ill. And I did not find out until a demand for my presence at a custody hearing 3 months after he passed away was delivered in my mailbox. So you can imagine this image holds great emotional impact for me, and someday maybe I'll go visit his grave, but I have not done that yet. This is a mausoleum. As you can see, not all of the imagery is high emotional impact, mourning, grief, and melancholy. I like this image because it's very ornate and very over the top, and we will see other examples of other mausoleum styles as we go on. This is a very different style of mausoleum and monument. It stands in the center of Crossroads in Staglieno Cemeterio. And we will take a minute just to look at a map of the property. And I'd like to note that this property sprawls all over hills and valleys. As you can see, this cemetery has been added on hodgepodge. The surrounding area landowners have donated land in not a very organized way. But as I have said, it sprawls out everywhere, and I will try and get an aerial shot. Okay, back in my college days, I used to have an aerial view of the cemetery, and I couldn't find it online. This, however, is a partial aerial view of Genoa. And if you look center left, just above the V for the valley, you'll see what I believe to be, based on the description, the Staglieno Cemetery. And you can see by looking at the tree line, these mausoleums are huge, and they're all different styles because they were built over time, primarily from the 1700s to the early 1900s. So there's a wide variety of personal taste in design. Some people clearly loved Gothic everything. And you can see that it's just in some places it just looks like a hodgepodge. You bought some land, somebody died, you hired, an engineer and a stonesmith and sometimes an architect maybe if you were building a mausoleum, and you built your monument to your loved ones or to your family. And there are paths and staircases up and down the hillside, hither and yon, leading from one place to another. It's in some ways a child's delight if you were to go and walk this area, and someday I wish to do that. It's on my bucket list. And I want to stop here for a minute and look at this staircase. This is a spiral staircase cut into the side of the hill. It's beautifully done. And I want to talk about something for a minute. When you see certain symbolism in geometric form, for example, the spiral. This is my jewelry. This is my work. It's what I did for a number of years to supplement my income and provide for my needs when I was in college, and then shortly afterwards when I wasn't employed in a full-time job. The necklace is a collar type necklace with a spiral-ish kind of design. The earrings are definitely spiral, and they are a riff on the bracelet, which is double coils hooked together in such a way that it reminds you of a lobster's back when it lays on your wrist. And this is a 4,000-year-old design. This is not something new. This is all wrapped wire, including the collar for the necklace and the necklace focal piece itself. It takes time and it takes some skill, and you've seen this type of jewelry now very popular. Wire wrap jewelry has been very popular for about the last, I don't know, 7 to 10 years. These techniques were taught to me by my teacher, who is a metalsmith. He works primarily with shape and form. He does stunningly beautiful and unique work. And when I am in chat and I hear somebody say, oh, let's look for the jewelry on some senator or some congressperson, my hackles go up. It kind of irritates me. Because when I look at those designs, I look at patterns that are built into nature, and the spiral is a reoccurring natural pattern. It's based on a Fibonacci number series that is pleasing to the eye. And in my mind, this design that is pleasing to the eye is a gift from God. It's not necessarily, in every case, a sign or symbol of someone who's involved in horrific behavior that is abhorrent to God. This pattern, the spiral, is a building block in nature, and when I see it, I see a gift from God that is both pleasing to the eye and useful in engineering and construction. And when you immediately label someone because they're wearing a design that is or resembles the spiral, you show your ignorance of engineering, design, history, art history specifically in this case, and I find it very offensive. So that's the end of my lecture on that. We're going to move on, but just know that for those of you who know who he is, there's a part of me that resembles 0 Hour 1 very much. And moving along, we can see on this replication of a woman that nature has stained her right eye. That's actually watermark that has stained the cheek and lower face as if she were crying. And I sometimes wonder if those types of things aren't meant to make us think a little deeper and a little be a little more thoughtful about what we see around us. And one of the things that this cemetery has a fine collection of is Art Deco. Art Deco and Art Nouveau are two artistic movements that lasted a very short time, and Art Nouveau is more resembles nature. It's very flowery, and Art Deco is sort of transitioning into a more geometric design. This is a detail of one of the angel's wings in the cemetery, and it's an example of high craftsmanship. This is not easy to do in marble, and marble is very fragile and friable, and this is an excellent example. And here is one. This doesn't have as much detail in the wings, but it is a very fine example of figurative sculpture. It's an angel, clearly, and the angel is draped over the sarcophagus of a family member, and there are other smaller family members' monuments in front of it. And I sometimes wonder if angels are messengers, as we're taught, if they don't get tired of trying to get through to us, and if this isn't their, frustrated, exhausted pose. Fanciful thinking, I know, but it's what goes through my head when I'm not pressed by modern life and I have the freedom to just let my mind wander. This is a very good example of one of the older pieces that has not been cleaned and restored. It's full of mold, bacteria, and other things that throughout the cycle of life are there naturally to decay and renew. Here is a very nice example of the Bentley Whitehead family memorial in the Protestant section of the cemetery. And this is a great example of the work of the American Friends for Italian Monumental Sculpture. They help fund the preservation and restoration of this beautiful, serene cemetery in Genoa, Italy. And this is a good example from another monument recently restored of what the detail and craftsmanship looked like when the monuments were first installed. And yet a closer look at the Bentley Whitehead monument, the level of detail and the delicacy of expression is just astonishing. You've seen that there is a Protestant section, you've seen different architectural design, you've seen different time frames, you've seen different cultural representations, you've seen costume representations, you've seen architectural representations, and now we're going to look a little closer at culture. In the cemetery, there are three main sections. You've already seen examples from the Protestant cemetery section and some of the Catholic cemetery section. And now we're going to turn our attention to the Jewish cemetery section, which is in two different places. Just as there are different interpretations or flavors or what have you of Catholicism and Protestantism, there are also differing sects of Judaism. And so I'm going to speak in very broad, general terms what the accepted Orthodox and conservative Jewish practices are with regard to funeral arrangements. And you can see in this picture above two above ground sarcophagi, which is the accepted practice in Judaism that you are buried above ground, and these happen to be in particular disrepair. It looks like one of them has been vandalized, and this above ground sarcophagus, you will often see stones. If you remember Schindler's List, in two parts of the film you saw Holocaust survivors and their descendants placing stones on the edges of the sarcophagus. And the meaning behind this is, I remember you, I was here to pay my respects to you, I pray for your family, I take care of your family if that's part of our relationship, and there is an obligation to take care of widows and orphans of your family and your friends. You don't let them go to public charity if at all possible. And this is a more modern representation of Jewish funerary monument. It is still in the Jewish section, and you can see the traditional sarcophagi both on the left and in the background. And what I mean by more modern thought is that there is actually a monument here. And not only is there a monument here, but it's been here for quite some time. And you can see that is evidenced by the tree or the plant that has grown up into it, around it, and has now died. Traditionally, it would not have been acceptable to put up any kind of monument. It would have been thought of as scandalous. But even though this is an older monument, it is still modern in thought. And here is an either Catholic or, I'm going to guess, probably a Protestant representation of what we just saw in the Jewish practices, that this angel is carrying home the deceased to their final rest. And maybe that's something we should be reconsidering, that we bear one another's burdens, that we show compassion and empathy, that we don't look at people as anything other than human and exactly like us. We're done with our tour of Staglieno Cemetery in Genoa, Italy. I thought instead of going back to the desk that we just sit by the river for a minute. The intro has meaning to people who know me well. The scripture at the end of my usual outro explains what the fishing motif is and why it's important. If you're not Christian or you don't understand the references that I make, well, then perhaps some of what I produce and some of the associations I make are confusing or irrelevant to you, and that's totally okay. If you are a Christian or you're interested in the material that I produce and some of the things behind it, I'm totally open to making videos and having discussions or chats about those kinds of things. And if that's what you're interested in, feel free to leave me a comment below in the YouTube comments box. BitChute, by all means, you guys are still number one, and you're welcome to leave comments as well. You can reach me also at my email address, which is info@halieusmedia.com, and it is the email address that is plastered all over the content disclaimer at the head of this video. Oh, and I almost forgot. It's on the desk every day. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us. Bye.